Outside the saloon, someone was already running at full speed to alert Cesar Marquez that his sons had just been destroyed by an old man, that the untouchable Marquez family had finally been challenged, and the legend of Ghost Morales was about to be reborn in blood and gunfire, spreading across the territory like wildfire. Cesar Marquez received the news in his mansion on the hill, the largest house in Redemption Falls, built on blood money and stolen land accumulated through decades of violence and intimidation. When his foreman burst in, stuttering about his sons being injured, Cesar's face passed from confusion to cold fury in seconds. His eyes became chips of ice, his jaw set like granite. "What do you mean injured?" Cesar demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that his men knew meant someone was about to die. "Explain yourself clearly and quickly." "Some old vagrant, boss," the foreman stammered, terrified to deliver such news. He broke Carlos's wrist, shattered Javier's face. "They are with the doctor right now. The doc says Carlos might never use that hand properly again. Javier lost 4 teeth and his nose is broken in 3 places." Cesar rose slowly from his leather chair, a massive piece of furniture that had cost more than most people in town earned in a year. He was 52 years old, built like a bull with eyes that had watched men die without flinching, without showing a trace of mercy or remorse. He had killed his first man at 16 and had not stopped since then, building his empire one murder at a time. His ranch empire was constructed on intimidation, murder, and fear. Nobody touched his sons. Nobody disrespected his family name. Nobody challenged his authority and lived to tell about it. "Gather all the men," Cesar said quietly, his voice deceptively calm in a way that made the foreman's blood run cold. "Every single one of them. I want 20 guns at that saloon in 10 minutes. Bring them all. Leave no one behind. We are going to teach this town a lesson about what happens when someone crosses the Marquez family." In 15 minutes, the street outside the Red Snake Saloon was filled with horses and armed men. 20 gunmen, the most dangerous killers that Cesar's money could buy, surrounded the building in a show of overwhelming force. It was overkill, an absolute demonstration of power. But Cesar wanted everyone in town to see what happened to those who challenged him. He wanted the lesson to be written in blood and remembered for generations. Cesar kicked open the saloon doors with such force they nearly came off their hinges. His eyes fixed on Ghost, who had not even turned around, still sitting calmly at his table as if 20 armed men meant nothing to him at all. "The old man must be stupid, suicidal, or both," Cesar growled, advancing into the room with his men fanning out behind him. "You put your hands on my sons, my blood. Do you have any idea what I do to people who defy me? Do you know how many men I have killed for less than what you have done?" Ghost finally turned around, moving with deliberate slowness. And for the first time, Cesar Marquez saw the old man's face clearly in the lamplight. He saw the scars, the eyes, the way the man moved with predatory grace despite his age. Cesar's blood turned to ice water in his veins as recognition dawned. "No," Cesar whispered, his voice cracking with sudden fear. "It cannot be. You are dead. You are supposed to be dead. We made sure of it 15 years ago. We drove you out. You swore you would never return." "You made sure of nothing," Ghost said, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years of controlled rage. "And now, Cesar, you are going to pay for every life you have taken, every family you have destroyed, every innocent person you have murdered for profit and power. The debt has come due, and I am here to collect it in full." The massacre that would be remembered for 100 years was about to begin in the Red Snake Saloon, and death itself had come to collect what was owed. Cesar's face cycled through emotions rapidly, disbelief giving way to recognition, recognition transforming into pure terror as the implications sank in. His hand trembled visibly as he pointed at Ghost with a shaking finger. "Guillermo Morales," Cesar gasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "The ghost of Black Lagoon Creek. The legend who cleaned out the entire Blackstone gang in a single night. The man who killed 17 members of the Red River Raiders without taking a single hit himself." Murmurs rippled through his hired guns like a wave. The legend was supposed to be dead, retired, disappeared into myth and memory. But legends never die. They only wait for the right moment to return and remind the world why they were feared in the first place. "We had a deal 15 years ago, Cesar," Ghost said, rising slowly to his full height, his movements fluid despite his age. I left the outlaw life behind. I hung up my guns. I promised my dying wife I would never kill again. You agreed to stay out of my way, to leave me alone in my mountains. But you could not help yourself, could you? You had to keep expanding, keep killing, keep destroying innocent lives. You had to murder that settler family last week. A small family trying to make an honest living on a piece of land they had every right to occupy. A father who worked from sunrise to sunset. A mother who tended her garden and sang hymns. And a little girl, Cesar, 7 years old with her whole life ahead of her. You burned them alive in their cabin because they refused to sell you their land at a fraction of its worth. Business, Cesar said, trying to recover his composure and authority in front of his men. Nothing personal, just business. The land was valuable. They were in the way. That is how the world works. The strong take from the weak. Now it is personal. Ghost replied, his voice carrying the finality of a death sentence. Now you face judgment for your sins. Cesar's confidence returned somewhat as he looked around at his numbers. 20 guns against one old man. The mathematics seemed simple and overwhelmingly in his favor. You may have been something once, Morales, Cesar said, his voice gaining strength. But you are 57 years old now. Your hands tremble with age. Your eyes are failing. Your reflexes have slowed. You are just a washed-up has-been living on a reputation from decades ago. You are nothing but a ghost of what you once were. Ghost smiled, but there was no humor in it, only the cold promise of death. The smile of a predator who has cornered his prey. Let us test that theory, shall we? Let us see if age has truly dulled these old hands. The fastest gunman in Cesar's crew, a hired killer named Cobra Johnson who had 23 confirmed kills to his name, drew first. His hand was a blur of motion, his reputation well earned. Bang! But Ghost's hand moved like lightning itself, faster than humanly possible. He did not even seem to draw his weapon. The revolver simply appeared in his hand as if by magic, and Cobra Johnson fell instantly, a perfect hole between his eyes before his own gun had fully cleared leather. The legendary killer was dead before he hit the floor. My God, someone started to say, but the words were cut off by more gunfire. Bang, bang, bang! 3 more men collapsed before they could even aim their weapons properly, each shot finding its mark with surgical precision. Ghost moved like smoke given form, rolling behind a table as bullets splintered the wood around him, splinters flying like shrapnel. Bang! Bang! 2 more men behind the doors fell, clutching mortal wounds. The saloon exploded into absolute chaos and carnage. Muzzle flashes illuminated the smoke-filled room like lightning strikes. Ghost moved through the chaos like a specter, like death itself made flesh. Every shot counted, every movement economical and practiced. There was no wasted motion, no panic, only decades of experience and muscle memory taking over. He kicked a table over, using it as cover while bullets thudded into the wood. Bang, bang! 2 more men fell, their weapons dropping from lifeless fingers. Cesar retreated toward the door, his remaining men forming a protective wall around him, but that wall was crumbling with every passing second. Out of 20 professional killers, only 8 remained standing, and they looked terrified, their eyes wide with the realization that they were facing something beyond their understanding. Kill him, Cesar screamed, his voice breaking with desperation and fear. I will give $10,000 to whoever kills him, 10,000 in gold, just kill him now. But Guillermo Ghost Morales was not just a gunfighter, not merely a man who was good with weapons. He was an artist of death, a master of his deadly craft. And this saloon was his canvas, and the masterpiece was far from complete. He had more lessons to teach, more judgment to deliver. The 8 remaining gunfighters dispersed, trying to flank Ghost from multiple angles with professional precision. They were skilled men, hired killers who had survived years in the brutal West through cunning and ruthlessness. But they had never faced anyone like Ghost Morales in his element. They had never stood against a legend made real. Bang! Ghost fired through a mirror hanging on the wall, the ricochet catching a man hiding behind the bar. The gunslinger collapsed, clutching his throat as blood poured between his fingers. 7 remaining. Ghost's revolver clicked empty. In the fraction of a second it took him to reload, 2 men charged him from different directions, thinking they had found their opportunity. This was their fatal mistake, their last error in a life of violence. Ghost dropped the empty weapon and moved with the speed and grace of a man half his age. His fist connected with the first man's jaw, with devastating force accumulated from decades of hard living. The outlaw's head snapped to the side, teeth flying from his mouth in a spray of blood and enamel. Before the body hit the floor, Ghost grabbed the gun hand of the second attacker, twisted it with brutal efficiency, and drove his elbow into the man's throat with crushing force. The man's windpipe collapsed with an audible crunch. 2 bodies on the floor. Ghost picked up a dropped revolver, rolled behind the piano with acrobatic grace that belied his years, and came up firing. Bang, bang, bang. 3 men fired simultaneously at where Ghost had been a moment before. But Ghost was already moving, always one step ahead. He slid forward across the blood-slicked floor as if he were 25 years old again, his body remembering every lesson learned in a lifetime of violence and survival. Muscle memory carved by decades of staying alive when others wanted him dead. Bang, bang, bang. 3 perfect shots, 3 bodies dropping in rapid succession, each man dead before he understood what had happened. Then silence fell over the saloon like a burial shroud. The Red Snake Saloon had become a graveyard, a monument to the folly of underestimating a legend. 20 men had entered confident in their numbers, feeling immortal and invincible. 20 bodies now decorated the floor, blood pooling and mixing together. Smoke hung in the air like morning fog. Ghost stood alone amidst the carnage, reloading calmly with steady hands, his movements practiced and sure. Not a scratch on him, not even a graze. His supposedly trembling old hands were steady as stone, as reliable as they had been 30 years ago. Cesar Marquez was frozen in the doorway, his face white as milk, his legs refusing to move. All his power, all his money, all his influence meant nothing against this force of nature. "You know what happens now, Cesar," Ghost said, walking toward him through the bodies with measured steps, each footfall echoing in the silence. Each step was deliberate, final, inexorable as death itself. "Wait, wait," Cesar stammered, his voice breaking. "Can we make a deal? I have money, land, gold, whatever you want. Name your price. I can make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. We can forget this ever happened." Ghost's eyes were empty, cold as a winter grave, devoid of mercy or compassion. "I want justice," he said simply, "and that is something your money cannot buy." Bang! Cesar collapsed, grabbing his shattered knee and screaming in agony. "Not dead," Ghost said coldly, standing over the fallen tyrant. "Not yet. Your suffering has only just begun." Cesar writhed on the saloon porch floor, his knee destroyed and bleeding through his expensive pants, the finest fabric money could buy now soaked with blood. The most powerful man in 3 territories was reduced to a sobbing wretch, all his authority stripped away in an instant. Ghost walked out slowly, his boots crunching on the wooden boards, each step measured and deliberate. The street was filled with townspeople who had been hiding in shops and houses during the gunfight, but now they emerged cautiously, drawn by the silence that followed the storm of violence. They came to witness the fall of their tyrant, to see the impossible made real before their eyes. "Please," Cesar begged, his voice hoarse with pain and desperation. "Please, I am begging you. Show mercy. I will leave. I will give you everything. Just let me live. I will disappear. You will never see me again." "How did that settler beg you for mercy?" Ghost asked, his voice quiet but carrying across the silent street so everyone could hear. His words were judgment pronounced for all to witness. "How did his wife plead when you set fire to their cabin with them inside? How did their 7-year-old daughter cry out as the smoke filled her lungs and the flames consumed her small body?" Cesar's face crumbled as the weight of his sins crashed down upon him. Everyone was watching, everyone heard the accusations, everyone knew the truth of what he had done. His crimes were being spoken aloud for all to witness. "You are going to answer for every life you have taken," Ghost continued, his voice carrying the weight of divine judgment. "But not to me. To them." He pointed at the gathering crowd of townspeople, victims all of them in one way or another. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, her face hard with years of suppressed grief and rage. Maria Henderson, whose husband Cesar had hanged for allegedly stealing a horse that the man had never stolen, a false accusation to seize their property. Then came old Thomas Brewster, whose land Cesar had confiscated through legal manipulation and violence, leaving the elderly man homeless and destitute. Then others emerged, dozens of others, each one carrying scars from Cesar Marquez's reign of terror. Each had a story of loss and suffering. "No, no, you cannot do this," Cesar screamed, understanding what was about to happen. "This is murder. This is against the law. Someone call the sheriff. Someone stop this madness." "No," Ghost said with cold finality. "This is justice. True justice, not the corrupt mockery you have created in this town." He turned to face the crowd, addressing them directly. "He belongs to you now. The law failed you for years because he owned the law. I am giving you what the law could not provide. I am giving you justice." The crowd moved forward as one, and Cesar's screams echoed behind Ghost as he walked away. Ghost did not look back, did not need to witness what he had set in motion. Some things were as inevitable as the sunrise, as certain as death itself. Justice would be served one way or another. He found his horse, a gray mare named Whisper, tied outside the general store where he had left her hours ago. As he mounted, Sheriff Davis appeared, his hand resting on his weapon but not drawing it, knowing that such an action would be suicide and pointless. "I should arrest you," Davis said weakly, his voice lacking conviction. He had been on Cesar's payroll for a decade, had turned a blind eye to countless crimes. "You just killed 20 men. You incited a mob to murder. I should take you in." Ghost looked down at him from his saddle, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "But you will not, because you know I am the only justice this town has seen in 10 years. You know that everything I did was righteous, even if it was not legal. You know those men deserved their fate." Davis stared at the saloon, at the crowd around Cesar, at the bodies visible through the doors. Slowly, with a gesture of defeat and perhaps relief, he unpinned his badge and let it drop into the dust of the street. "I am done," Davis muttered, his voice hollow. "I am finished with this life. I am finished being a puppet for evil men." Ghost nodded with something approaching respect. "Smart man. Good choice." He turned Whisper toward the setting sun, toward the mountains in the distance. Behind him, Redemption Falls was finally living up to its name, finally finding the redemption that had been denied for so long. But Ghost Morales' work was not finished, not by a long measure. His path of vengeance had more miles to travel. 3 days later, Ghost was camped in the mountains 50 miles from Redemption Falls, far from civilization. He had done what he came to do. The settlers had been avenged. Cesar Marquez was dead. The town was free from tyranny. He should have felt peace, should have felt that his wife's memory had been honored. But old gunfighters learned to trust their instincts, and his instincts were screaming that something was wrong, that danger approached. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond his campfire, a sound that did not belong to the natural rhythms of the night. Ghost's hand went toward his revolver with practiced speed, but he was a fraction too slow this time. Age was not kind to reflexes, no matter how legendary the man. "Do not move, old man," a familiar voice commanded from the shadows. "Do not even breathe wrong, or I will cut you in half with this rifle." Ghost froze, his experienced mind calculating odds and possibilities. He knew that voice, recognized the hatred in it. Carlos Marquez stepped into the firelight, his right wrist splinted and bandaged, his left hand holding a rifle with steady hatred. Behind him, Javier emerged from the darkness, his face still a mass of bruises and bandages, swollen and discolored. He too was armed with grim determination. The Marquez sons had tracked him across 50 miles of wilderness, driven by rage and the need for vengeance. They had followed him with single-minded determination, learning skills they had never needed before, pushed beyond their pampered limits by hatred and loss. "Surprised, old man," Carlos said, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage and grief. "You thought we would just accept what you did? You killed our father. You destroyed everything we had, everything we were. Our empire is gone. Our name is dirt." Towns spit when they hear the name Marquez now. "Your father destroyed himself through his own evil actions," Ghost said calmly, his mind working through possible escapes and strategies. "I only helped him meet the justice he had evaded for so long. I only balanced the scales that had been weighted in his favor for decades." "Shut up," Javier screamed, his damaged face contorting with emotion and pain. "Just shut your mouth. Do you think you are some kind of hero? You are just a killer, just a murderer. You are a washed-up old assassin who could not let the past stay buried. You are no better than our father was. You are worse because you pretend to have righteousness on your side." Ghost studied them carefully with eyes that had evaluated countless dangerous situations. They were young, angry, traumatized, and stupid with grief, a dangerous combination indeed. But they were also shaking with emotion, their hands unsteady, their judgment clouded by loss and pain. They were not thinking clearly, operating on pure emotion rather than logic. "What do you boys plan to do?" Ghost asked quietly, keeping his voice level and non-threatening. "Shoot me in the back like cowards? Kill an unarmed man by the fire? Is that the revenge you want? That will not bring your father back. That will not restore what you lost. We are going to make you suffer the way you made him suffer," Carlos growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "We are going to make you beg for death before we grant it. We are going to Ghost kick dirt from the campfire into their eyes with a swift movement of his boot, a trick he had learned 40 years ago. The two brothers screamed, temporarily blinded by ash and embers. Ghost rolled to the side, grabbed his revolver from where it lay near his bedroll, and came up in one fluid motion that belied his years. His body remembered, always remembered. Bang! The rifle flew from Carlos's hands, the wood stock splintering from the impact of the bullet, fragments scattering. Bang! Javier's pistol suffered the same fate, knocked away before the young man could clear his vision and fire. The two brothers stood there, disarmed and helpless, rubbing their stinging eyes frantically, facing the man who had just disarmed them without killing them when he easily could have ended their lives. They were at his mercy, completely vulnerable. "I do not want to kill you boys," Ghost said quietly, lowering his weapon slightly but keeping it ready. "You are just young men who had a terrible father, who were raised wrong through no fault of your own. You had the misfortune of being born into evil, taught cruelty from childhood. But you can choose a different path now. You can be better than he was. You had your chance to kill us," Carlos said, confusion mixing with his rage. "Why did you not take it? Why are we still breathing?" "Because unlike your father, I do not kill without reason," Ghost replied. "Because you are victims of his evil just as much as anyone else in Redemption Falls. He poisoned you from birth, taught you cruelty, made you into monsters. But you are young enough to change, to become better men if you choose that path. But if you come after me again," Ghost continued, his voice hardening like steel, "if you make me face you one more time, I will show no mercy. There will be no second chance, no hesitation, no warning. I will put bullets in both of you without a moment of regret. Do you understand me clearly?" He mounted Whisper and rode into the darkness, leaving the brothers standing in the firelight, broken and lost, facing a choice about what kind of men they would become. Behind him, the Marquez brothers remained standing by the dying fire, their weapons destroyed, their pride shattered, their future uncertain. But hatred has a way of growing in darkness like poisonous mushrooms, festering in wounded hearts. And the brothers would make one last terrible decision that would seal their fate. 2 weeks passed since that night in the mountains. Ghost rode into a small town called Salvation Creek, barely more than a dusty crossroads in the wilderness. Population perhaps 200 souls. Just a general store, a blacksmith, a small church, and a handful of houses. He needed supplies, nothing more. He would stock up, ride out, disappear into the territories like smoke on the wind. Perhaps he would finally find that elusive peace he had been seeking for 15 years. That quiet end to a violent life. But peace never came easily to men like Ghost Morales, men who carried the weight of so many dead on their souls. He was in the general store, examining supplies and making his selections, when he heard horses outside, many of them. Through the dusty window he counted 12 riders approaching, and his blood ran cold with recognition. Leading them were Carlos and Javier Marquez, and behind them rode hired guns, bounty hunters, anyone the brothers could recruit with what remained of their father's fortune. They had spent every cent they could scrape together to buy an army for this moment. The storekeeper, a nervous man named Peters, went pale as death when he saw the riders. "Sir, you have to run," Peters whispered urgently, his voice shaking. "There is a back door. You can get to your horse. Ride fast, and maybe you can escape." "It would not matter," Ghost said calmly, resignation in his voice. "They would just follow me, hunt me down eventually. They will not stop until one side or the other is dead. Some things need to be finished, need to reach their final conclusion. Today is that day." He walked out onto the wooden sidewalk, stepping into the bright sunlight. The Marquez brothers sat on their horses, surrounded by their purchased army of killers for hire. This was their moment of triumph, or so they thought. "Last chance, Morales," Carlos called out, his voice carrying false confidence. "You are outnumbered 12-1. Surrender now and we will make it quick. We will give you a clean death. That is more mercy than you showed our father." Ghost looked up at the sky, cloudless and blue, stretching endlessly overhead. A beautiful day to die, if it came to that. The kind of day that made a man grateful to be alive, even if only for moments more. "I gave you boys a chance to walk away," Ghost said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "I let you live when I could have killed you. I showed you mercy when your father never showed mercy to anyone. But I can see now that the stupidity runs deeper than I thought, that some lessons cannot be learned through words alone." "Kill him!" Javier screamed, his damaged face twisting with hatred. "End this now." The 12 riders drew their weapons with practiced speed, metal singing as guns cleared leather. This was it, the final moment. Ghost sighed deeply, a sound of profound weariness. "I am sorry, old girl," he whispered to Whisper, his faithful mare. "You deserved a better master, a quieter life." And then his hands dropped to his revolvers, and the legend of Ghost Morales erupted one final time in thunder and lightning. Bang, 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 bang. Ghost drew both pistols and fired in a continuous roar that echoed off the buildings. He moved like water flowing, like smoke drifting, like death itself made manifest in human form. 6 men fell in the first 3 seconds, their bodies tumbling from saddles before they could process what was happening. Bang, 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 bang. He dove behind a water trough as return fire shattered the wood around him, splinters flying like shrapnel, water pouring from bullet holes. 3 more shots, 3 more bodies hitting the dust of Salvation Creek's main street. The Marquez brothers were screaming orders, but their hired guns were panicking, realizing they had made a terrible mistake. This was not a gunfight, not a battle between equals. This was an execution, a demonstration of skill so far beyond their level that resistance was meaningless. And Guillermo Ghost Morales had 12 bullets remaining in his revolvers, more than enough to finish what these foolish young men had started. When the gun smoke finally cleared, drifting away on the slight breeze, 11 bodies lay scattered in the street of Salvation Creek like broken dolls. The 12th man, a young bounty hunter who could not have been more than 19 years old, was sitting in the dirt with his hands raised high, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please," the boy begged, tears streaming down his face. "Please, I have a wife. I have a baby daughter. I needed the money. I did not know what I was getting into. I am sorry. I am so sorry." "Then go home to them," Ghost said quietly, his voice gentle despite the violence he had just unleashed. "Go back to your family and tell everyone what happens when people hunt legends. Tell them that some men should never be pushed, never be tested. Tell them that death itself sometimes walks among us wearing human skin." The boy ran, mounted his horse with trembling hands that could barely hold the reins, and rode away as if hell itself pursued him, which in a sense it did. He would carry this story for the rest of his life, would wake screaming from nightmares for decades. Carlos and Javier Marquez stood alone in the middle of their dead army, their weapons empty, their faces white with shock and the realization of their own mortality. Their grand plan for revenge had crumbled into dust and death. Ghost walked toward them slowly through the carnage, his revolver still smoking in his hands, trailing wisps of gray. "Your father made a choice," Ghost said, stopping a few feet from them. "He chose power over decency, violence over mercy, cruelty over compassion. He chose to build an empire on suffering and blood. And that choice killed him as surely as my bullet did. Now you boys have the same choice to make, the same decision that will determine whether you live or die today." Carlos's hand twitched toward a knife in his belt, a last desperate gesture of defiance. "Do not do it," Ghost said flatly, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Do not make me kill you, boy. I have killed enough today. I am tired of death." Carlos froze, his hand stopping inches from the weapon. The fight drained out of him like water from a broken vessel. "You can die here today, joining your father and his sins in whatever hell awaits evil men," Ghost continued, his words measured and final. "Or you can ride away from this place, Find honest work somewhere far from here, and live to see your grandchildren grow old. You can break the cycle of violence your father started. You can be better men than he ever was. The choice is yours, but choose now because my patience is at an end." The brothers looked at each other, and something passed between them, an unspoken communication born of shared blood and shared trauma. All the rage, all the thirst for vengeance drained away, replaced by exhaustion and grief, and the realization that they were just orphaned boys playing at being men, carrying sins that were not truly theirs. "We are done," Carlos whispered finally, his voice broken and hollow. "We are finished with this. We are finished with revenge. We are finished with the life our father chose. We just want it to end." "Then it ends here," Ghost said. "Ride away and never look back. Find new names, new lives. Forget the Marquez name and everything it stood for. Be the men you could have been if your father had been a good man." The brothers turned their horses slowly and rode away. Two broken men carrying the weight of their father's sins. Two orphans seeking redemption in a world that would not easily forgive their family name. Ghost watched them go, hoping they would find the peace that had eluded him for so long. The townspeople of Salvation Creek emerged cautiously from their hiding places, staring at the carnage that had transformed their peaceful street into a battlefield, looking at the old man who had turned their town into a graveyard. Bodies lay everywhere, blood staining the dust, the price of challenging a legend. "Who are you?" Peters asked, his voice filled with awe and fear in equal measure. "What manner of man can do what you just did?" Ghost tipped his hat respectfully, a gesture from a more civilized time. "Nobody special," he said quietly. "Just a ghost passing through, a remnant of a time that should be forgotten. Just an old man trying to find peace in a violent world." He mounted Whisper and rode out of Salvation Creek as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold like blood and fire. The legend would say that Ghost Morales died peacefully in 1897 at the age of 75 in a cabin somewhere in the Colorado mountains, far from civilization, but others claim to have seen him over the years, an old rider on a gray mare appearing when evil needs answering, when justice needs a gun, when the innocent need protecting from those who would harm them. Because true legends never die. They only wait to be needed again. Wait for the next story to be told. Wait for the next injustice that demands correction. They sleep but never truly disappear. And so the legend of Guillermo Ghost Morales continues, whispered around campfires, told in saloons, passed from generation to generation as a reminder that some men transcend mortality through their deeds, and thus ends the legend. Or does it simply begin again, cycling endlessly through time, waiting for the next time death must walk among mortals wearing human form? If you have reached this point in the tale, you have witnessed how justice was forged in gunpowder and righteous anger. You have seen how an old man found redemption through the very violence he had sworn to leave behind. The story of Guillermo Ghost Morales reminds us that legends do not need graves. They only need a reason to return, a cause worth fighting for, an injustice that demands correction. The ghost rode off into the sunset, leaving behind a trail of change and transformation. Two young heirs to a destroyed empire, Carlos and Javier, faced with a crucial choice that would determine not just their fate, but their very souls. Would they break the cycle of violence, or would they be consumed by it? Only time would reveal the answer. What became of the Marquez brothers remains a mystery wrapped in speculation and hope. Some say they found honest work as ranch hands in Montana, living quiet lives under assumed names. Others claim they died in a mining accident in Colorado, crushed by falling rock in a silver mine. Still others insist they returned to their old ways and were hanged by vigilantes in Texas for cattle rustling. The truth, like so many truths about the Old West, has been lost to time and legend. But the legend of Ghost Morales lives on, growing with each telling, embellished by time but rooted in truth. He became a symbol of something larger than himself, larger than any one man could be. He became the embodiment of justice when the law fails, of righteousness when corruption reigns, of hope when darkness seems overwhelming. He became the answer to the question that haunted the Old West. What happens when evil men face someone who will not back down, who cannot be bought, who represents absolute judgment? In the years that followed, dozens of men claimed to be Ghost Morales, seeking to capitalize on his fame and reputation. Most were exposed as frauds quickly. But occasionally, in some remote town facing tyranny, an old man would appear. He would be quiet, unassuming, sitting in the corner of a saloon drinking whiskey. And when evil men pushed too far, when they humiliated someone they thought weak and helpless, that old man would stand. He would reveal himself as death incarnate, as judgment made flesh. Was it truly Ghost Morales, living far beyond his supposed 75 years? Was it a disciple, someone who had learned his methods and carried on his mission? Or was it simply the legend itself, so powerful that it manifested in reality whenever it was needed? The answer depends on what you choose to believe about the nature of legends and the power of stories to shape reality. The Red Snake Saloon in Redemption Falls never reopened. It stood as a monument to what happened when evil was challenged, when legends proved to be real. The bloodstains could never be fully cleaned from the wooden floor, no matter how hard people scrubbed. Some said you could still hear gunshots on quiet nights, echoes of that terrible battle reverberating through time itself. Redemption Falls itself transformed after that night. With Cesar Marquez dead and his empire dismantled, honest people could finally thrive. Families returned to farms they had been driven from. Businesses opened without fear of extortion. A new sheriff was elected, a genuine lawman who believed in justice rather than serving the highest bidder. The town lived up to its name at last, finding the redemption that had been denied for so long. Maria Henderson remarried, found love again after years of widowhood. Thomas Brewster reclaimed his land and built a new home. The families that had suffered under Marquez rule slowly healed, their wounds gradually closing, though the scars would remain forever. They never forgot what Ghost Morales had done for them, the justice he had delivered when no one else would or could. As for Ghost himself, if the legend is to be believed, he finally found his peace in those Colorado mountains. He built a small cabin near a stream where he could hear water flowing over rocks. He kept to himself mostly, occasionally riding into town for supplies, but never staying long, never drawing attention. He tended a small garden, fished in the stream, and spent his evenings sitting on his porch watching the sun set behind the peaks. Did he regret the violence of his final days, the return to the life he had sworn to leave behind? Those who claimed to have known him in those final years said he carried a deep sadness, a weariness of soul that came from seeing too much death, causing too much death. But they also said he had no regrets about what he had done in Redemption Falls and Salvation Creek. He had delivered justice to those who thought themselves above it. He had protected the innocent from predators. He had done what needed to be done, and sometimes that is all a man can ask of himself. The grave marker, if it exists, is unmarked and unknown. Some say he was buried near his cabin by a traveling preacher who found him dead of old age, sitting in his rocking chair with a peaceful expression on his weathered face. Others claim he simply rode off one day and never returned. That whisper carried him into the mountains one final time, and neither horse nor rider was ever seen again. Perhaps he became one with the legends he helped create, transcending mortality to become something more than merely human. But on certain nights, when the moon is full and the wind carries whispers through mountain passes, old cowboys claim you can see him. A rider on a gray mare, silhouetted against the sky, watching over the land he helped tame. And when evil men rise to power, when tyrants think themselves untouchable, that rider descends from the mountains to remind them that death itself sometimes walks among us, seeking those who need to be judged. They humiliated the old cowboy in that saloon, thinking him weak and helpless, thinking him a victim for their cruel amusement. They mocked his age, poured whiskey over his head, threw his hat in the dirt, and laughed at his silence. They thought they had found easy prey, a broken-down old man who would accept their abuse without resistance. But what they had actually awakened was death itself wearing human skin, judgment made flesh, a legend who had been sleeping but never truly died. They had humiliated the one man in the territory who should never have been tested, the one man who represented absolute consequences for absolute evil. And in doing so, they sealed not just their own fate, but the fate of everyone connected to their family's empire of cruelty. Ghost Morales was death itself, patient and inevitable, waiting in the shadows for evil men to overstep their bounds. And when they did, when they pushed too far and hurt too many, death stood up from its corner table, brushed off the whiskey, and reminded the world why legends are born and why they never truly die. The lesson remains for all who hear this tale. Treat others with respect and dignity, For you never know who you might be insulting. That quiet person in the corner? That old man sitting alone? That unassuming figure you dismiss as weak might be something far more dangerous than you can imagine. They might be death itself, waiting patiently for you to give them a reason to act, waiting for justice to be required. And when death stands up and reaches for its weapons, when legends prove themselves real, all the money and power and arrogance in the world will not save you from what you have brought upon yourself. The bill always comes due eventually, and death is a patient collector who never forgets and never forgives those who prey upon the innocent. No one in that saloon could have imagined that the silent old man sitting in the corner, drinking his whiskey with trembling,